Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today for the Infrascale Partner Program, where today we're talking about sales resources for 2019 and upcoming 2020 as well. So this session is going to be presented by Mike Wyman, and he's a member of the Infrascale team here. He is the Director of VAR and Mid-Market for the East region, and I'll be introducing him here in just one moment. We have a couple of housekeeping announcements just to let you know that the slides are available to you in the Partner Resource Center, so in the PRC. All you'll do is log into the PRC at prc.infrascale.com, and then you'll be able to access these slides there. We'll also send an email out with a copy of these slides and a recording of this presentation, so you have that available to you. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mike Wyman. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Carla. Appreciate that. So I'm going to just start with a question. How many of you on this call can today accurately discern the difference for your customers between backup with disaster recovery versus disaster recovery as a service? You know, there's a lot of different terms out there that you're going to find with backup and disaster recovery. Disaster recovery as a service is a relatively new one, and I come across partners all the time that are not quite sure how to kind of discuss that difference. If you look here, you could see that is probably the fastest growing area of our technology industry when it comes to business continuity. And the reason for that is one of the things we're going to demonstrate here on this webinar for you guys today. So the agenda that we're going to cover is how to properly position data protection. You're not going to hear me talk about backup a lot during this presentation. In fact, if it were up to me, we would never talk about backup. We need to be talking about uptime and business continuity with our customers and prospects. And then we're going to give you a talk track and some pitches that you can leverage with prospective customers utilizing those terms. And lastly, something we all have to do on a regular basis, we're going to show you how we can overcome objections, specifically around the most important objection that we typically see from our small business customers, and that is around price. I wanted to remind everybody that this is the third in a line of webinars that we're doing for our partners. And as Carla mentioned, you can find them out on the Partner Resource Center. If you do not have access to this link already, i.e. the password for it, please reach out to your Partner Success Manager or Territory Account Manager, and they will give that to you so that you have access to all of these presentations as we go along. So the first thing I want to kind of cover is really the paradigm that most of our customers are facing today in protecting their data. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago. Most of the backup solutions were built around protecting servers housing all the critical data and applications in their data center. Well, as we know, due to the proliferation of mobility and SaaS and just the explosion of data, that data is not sitting in the data centers any longer, at least not all of it. So for folks that want to protect their endpoint devices or remote offices, many of these applications aren't a good fit for doing that if they try and protect them at all. So with typical backup solutions, you could be leaving your customers exposed. Likewise, with Office 365 and Salesforce.com and many of the other popular SaaS-based solutions, customers are moving workloads from their own data centers into these SaaS vendors' clouds, and many of them are not aware that if an endpoint has a deletion of an email or a particular SharePoint file or what have you, that data is gone anywhere from 14 to 30 days later in the cloud. So that, again, for long-term data retention, you could be exposed against compliancy requirements and or policies. And lastly, the biggest scourge on our industry over the last half dozen years has been the explosion of ransomware and other malware variants that are really attacking at the endpoint and not really attacking at the data center. And some of the more recent ones are actually getting by your security and laying dormant looking for domain access and recovery points before they rear their ugly heads. So what I'm getting at is data protection applications that are focused around data center backup are not inclusive of enough to cover your customers' needs these days. So we've all heard the terms recovery point objective and recovery time objective, and certainly, that's still a very important thing for you to be considering with your customers these days. The point being that closer to this line here, you have both the RT and RPO. You're typically much more expensive of a solution. Think SAN-to-SAN replication over here as kind of an indication, and obviously that's not something you can have with many of your small business customers. So not all data is created equal. You should have solution sets for your clients at the application level, not just at the site level. Sure, it's easy to say, hey, here's your solution that'll cover everything, and we're going to show you how we can do that. But for those customers that do want something that's more specific by the application, you shouldn't try and have a one-size-fits-all for them, both from a cost versus performance perspective and just from a budgetary perspective. So I want to kind of show you how we attack that paradigm that is facing us today. For those critical applications that your customers know that every minute they're down, it's costing them productivity, it's costing them money, and it's costing them reputation. Our Cadillac is our Infrascale disaster recovery, which is our disaster recovery as a service solution. Now, unlike other solutions, we're not only providing a primary appliance on-prem, we're also marrying that to a secondary appliance that it has dedicated resources in our cloud. This is where we're very different from many of the other solutions. We also have the runbook orchestration, giving you the ability to not only boot a single workload, but multiple workloads in that cloud with dependencies intact. Now, that price point that we have from an MSRP perspective for that platform is $319 per terabyte per month. I'll show you on the next slide what that looks like from a partner perspective. But you should be really focused on providing this solution to your clients' applications that are really the ones that, again, it's really going to affect them adversely if they're down. The next platform in our portfolio is our Infrascale Cloud Backup, our oldest product, but certainly not the one that we've left any features out of, especially in comparison to other straight-to-cloud backup solutions. We not only have the ability to back up directly to the cloud, but you can also back up concurrently to local storage, and this can be 100% white-labeled by your firm to be your firm cloud backup solution, and it's 100% multi-tenant. But the coolest part of this solution is that it also includes ransomware anomaly detection, geolocation services, remote wipe services, and not only protects Windows servers, but also endpoint devices, and it's optimized for those endpoint devices, inclusive of iOS and Android. And that has a $141 per terabyte per month price. We got a lot of feedback from a lot of our partners saying we like both of these solutions. We position both of these solutions, but we have customers that have data that doesn't quite fit perfectly into one or the other. They wanted a hybrid solution, and so with that, we've come out with Infrascale Disaster Recovery Local. Now, the Infrascale Disaster Recovery Local, you want to kind of protect your Tier 2 applications, and it's kind of a midpoint SLA between this and this platform, as you can see at about a midpoint price point. The thing that you don't get with the IDR Local is that second dedicated appliance in our cloud. We're actually failing over to a VM farm like everybody in our competitor set is doing. But because of that, you don't get the runbook orchestration and the VM boot in the cloud. You only get the ability to boot those VMs on the local appliance. So we could still give you the 15-minute recovery time objective there, but without doing so in the cloud. And again, you can implement a solution stack for your customers that includes all three of these platforms to meet the specific needs of those applications. And the fourth platform is our Infrascale Cloud Application Backup that is really designed for protecting those SaaS vendors' applications, your instances there. Every change that's made in their cloud, we will actually take those changes and send them to our own cloud at an MSRP of $3 per seat per license. Now, this is the full portfolio from an MSRP perspective. And with the normal Infrascale partner pricing, you can see, the normal 30% discount that we can provide for you there. Now, the reason we showed you that is, again, no matter where the customer's data is, you can protect it all from a single dashboard with this solution. And you have the ability to protect multiple customers with the same line of business, or you can look to see which of your customers are using each line of business. So what are some leading questions that you can ask some of your customers or prospects to get them to talk to you about business continuity and not necessarily backup? You notice I haven't used the word backup in any one of these questions. We really want to have you guys position yourselves as a trusted consultant for them, as many of you already are, so that you're actually providing for them a service that they're willing to pay for beyond just a software or an appliance application. The one that I think is the most important question that you need to ask of these customers is, do you know what your critical applications are? They all do. And then the second question is, do you know what it costs you to be down with those applications on an hourly basis? Almost none of them do. We're going to show you during this presentation exactly how you can help them to discover exactly what their cost of downtime is, which will also help them to understand what are those critical applications and what they're worth to them versus, paying for a solution for protecting the less important applications. That's the end goal. So again, more than half of your customers out there, based on this survey, could not confidently recover their critical applications in inside of an hour. That's what we're trying to help you to discern for them, to help them provide that better solution. And even if they could identify those applications, they really can't quantify those costs, as I mentioned before. So this is a huge problem. According to IHS and a survey that was published just a couple of years ago, it's a $700 billion a year problem. But what you might find to be ironic is 75 cents on the dollar, actually a little bit more than that, is actually due to productivity loss, not revenue loss, not cost of repair. So these are nebulous costs that are very hard to kind of quantify for a lot of your customers. So if you can help them to do that, as I mentioned before, you're really going to help them create a better business continuity or uptime scenario for their business. Now, the biggest objection you're typically going to get from these customers is around price. Now, as we mentioned, we provide the solution as a monthly service, no matter which platform you're getting. But if they were to kind of go through the 90s way of determining total cost of ownership and figure that out over 3 years, they might be able to determine that, I can get something cheaper. Well, cheaper is not necessarily better. What you want to be able to show them is that there's not just acquisition costs. There is that cost of downtime, and that's what we're going to show you right here. So if you go out and look on the internet, you could find with several of our competitors out there, they actually publish it on their websites, and then there's third parties that provide means. Most of these calculators can be quite complicated. The one I like to use with my partners and their clients is this one that you see here. The basic formula is you want to kind of quantify their cost of downtime per hour by taking lost revenue on an annualized basis, lost productivity, lost recovery costs, and lost intangible costs. Now, this is a more difficult thing to quantify, and this is going to vary a lot depending on what the outage source was and what has actually happened there. But these two, we can help you to quantify, and you'll know a minimum cost per hour for those critical applications that you can give them, and they will know that there's typically going to be other costs that you can add in there. So the productivity cost is going to be the number of employees infected. Now, if you've got a manufacturing facility and some of these folks are in maintenance and that particular application being down isn't going to affect them doing their job, well, you wouldn't count them in there. So it's pretty easy to kind of figure out the percentage of the employees out there that are affected. And then you're going to want to get what the average cost of those employees per hour is. Again, you can work with the finance teams within your customers account set to get this information. Certainly their CFO would know. And then the last piece is the number of downtime hours. Over here for revenue loss, it's the gross annual revenue for the company divided by the total annual business hours that they actually are working. Again, this is pretty easy to discern. That percentage of impact is going to be similar to this over here, but in many cases it could be different. And then lastly, the number of hours of downtime. So I've given you an example here with a company, a fictitious company that has 100 employees. 60% of them are adversely affected if this or these critical applications are down. Their average hourly wage is $30 per hour. And this particular downtime event would be for 2 hours. So doing the multiplication, you come up with $3,600 there. You add that to the formula over here, dividing the annual revenue by the number of hours worked, the percentage affected, and the downtime. That's $1,736 added to the $3,600. It's just over $5,000 of lost revenue and lost productivity, not counting recovery costs or intangible costs. Now, when you start positioning this to your clients, and they understand it's not about just the cost of that software that I pay up front and factoring that out over 36 months. It's really about how to mitigate downtime, how to reduce this to less than 15 minutes, thus reducing this. Now you've got an interested customer in the disaster recovery as a service solution that you're positioning and not just a backup software. So we know that is something that is affecting your customers on a pretty pervasive basis. Basically, over 24 months, almost 100% of companies are affected. And it is not just hurricanes or ice storms or tornadoes that this is. In fact, some of the data I've seen, anywhere from 6 to 11% is really due to Mother Nature. The vast majority is customers kind of being infected by ransomware or viruses or hardware failure or user error that is really going to hit them. So you want to make sure you're covering against any kind of downtime event with a solution, not something that is just kind of focused on one particular application type of coverage. So how is this different from using backup and disaster recovery? It's really about you're not in a fix first, run later mode. You're taking hydrated instances of that critical application that are in a standby mode and just reconnecting your end users to that hydrated instance in seconds to minutes. That's how we can give you that 15-minute SLA. Worry about moving the zeros and ones later after they're back up and running and your customers, all quiet on the disaster front. When you start positioning this, which is getting the disaster mitigated and getting your end users back up and running, instead of backup where you're having to move data from one place to another to get people back up and running again, they start to understand it's worth a few more pennies per dollar to get that type of peace of mind. So with that, I will open it up to questions and see if there is any questions that we can answer here. Carla, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so for everyone on the line, there's a Q&A tool at the bottom of the page if you want to go ahead, and we'll give you a minute to pop some questions in there. And in the meantime, if you want to take a look at this slide here that's up, you can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and Infrascale, and LinkedIn, not Infrascale, and Facebook, but you'll find us there at Infrascale, and you can follow us there, and we'll, of course, follow you back. And if you have any questions that you want to send over to us, you can always email us at team@infrascale.com. Now, I see a couple of comments that are coming through and a few questions. So one of the comments here states that the slide on anatomy of downtime cost to a business. Wow, thanks, Mike. So I'm sure Mike is happy to share that with you, and we'll share those slides as well in the PRC, so you'll have access to that. There's a question here on the slide on RTO and RPO. It's talking a little bit about specifying the difference between RPO and RTO.
Yeah, so I pulled that slide up again here. Again, these are pretty ubiquitous terms in the industry these days, but I'm not sure most of your customers, and maybe not even some other folks in the industry, totally get it. The recovery point objective is the point at which your last backup occurred. And, you know, it used to be folks would do one backup a day. And but now with data really exploding, you got some environments where they want to back up, you know, once every 4 hours or, you know, 4 times a day or what have you. So that recovery point objective is going to go, you know, back from the point of the disaster or the incident to that, however often that cadence is for your backups. The recovery time objective is from that point of disaster or incident, how quickly you can get your end users back up and running again. And this is the term that we really leverage because, again, it's not about backup, it's about uptime, how quickly you can get folks working. But what version of backup are you going to leverage to get that up? If I did this 2 hours ago versus 24 hours ago, I have the potential of losing only 2 hours of data with the recovery point, but it's not going to affect when I get back up and running. That's all built into the disaster recovery as a service tool, and that's where we can get this down to 15 minutes here as opposed to hours. Hopefully that answered the question.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And then the last comment that I see coming in here is about the leading questions slide. So maybe we'll pop that one up again as well. It says the leading questions were great. Can you share that slide? And so we will put that this whole presentation into the PRC as well. But here's one more look at the leading questions if you wanted to take another peek at that. And I don't see any other questions coming through, but a few comments of thanks for the presentation, thank you, great presentation. And so again, we'll look to follow up with you with more information in the PRC, and we'll just, we're always updating the content that we have in there for our partners on a quarterly basis. We're adding things like Campaign in a Box, and we're always doing trainings on not only marketing for the PRC, but also on product, doing demos and leading that sort of training as well. So keep an eye out for the upcoming sessions on that. You can access those sessions at infrascale.com/events, and then you can always access the content in the PRC as well. So I want to thank everyone for your time in joining today. I want to thank you, Mike, for your time in presenting and getting all this information out to our partners. And we look forward to continued partnership with you, and have a great rest of your day.